Imagine for a moment that the heavens themselves are stirring with anticipation. The air crackles with an energy far beyond the ordinary, the kind of charge that shakes the very foundation of reality. It's a shift that not only impacts the world as we know it, but echoes through the corridors of time. God is about to launch a comeback, a return that will redefine everything. The idea of a divine return is not one that is new to humanity. Across various cultures, religions, and mythologies, there have been stories of gods descending from the heavens or prophets being sent to correct the course of humanity. Whether through the return of a Messiah or the revelation of hidden truths, there is a shared human belief that our spiritual connection is far from stagnant. It is alive, evolving, and at times calling for a shift in how we live, how we love, and how we understand our purpose. This divine comeback, however, is not just about the return of an entity. It is a moment for the world to reevaluate itself. It challenges us to face the most profound questions of our existence. Who are we? What is our purpose? And how are we to live? It brings forth the invitation to go beyond the surface and plunge into the depths of our spiritual being. This return is not a simple act of divine intervention. It is a catalyst for the transformation of humanity, a force that seeks to awaken the dormant potentials within us all. In this moment, God's return doesn't imply a singular event, but a movement that invites us to realign with the deepest truths that underlie our existence. It is a clarion call to stop living in the distractions and illusions that often cloud our judgment. This divine comeback challenges us to live authentically, to rediscover the beauty and simplicity, and to honor the interconnectedness of all life. The focus is no longer just on the power of a singular being, but on the collective awakening of every soul. The challenge presented by such a divine return is both exciting and daunting. It forces us to confront our current state of existence. Are we as individuals and as a collective truly ready for such a powerful force? Are we prepared to face the transformation that such a comeback would bring? There is a significant aspect of humility required when engaging with the divine. Humility doesn't mean subjugation, but recognizing the vastness of the universe, the depth of our ignorance, and our own limitations. In such a moment, it's necessary to put aside our egos and our need for control and simply surrender to the mystery of what is unfolding before us. The anticipation of God's return forces us to look at the state of our world. We cannot ignore the vast inequalities that persist, the environmental degradation, the wars and suffering that plague our societies. In a way, the world is crying out for intervention, yet this intervention must not come from a place of domination, but from one of restoration. God's comeback isn't a moment of wrath. It is a moment of healing. It is a moment where we are invited to recognize the brokenness of our world and to work together to mend it. But this is not a passive waiting. The divine return is a reciprocal relationship, one that asks us not just to be waiting for a Savior, but to actively seek our own salvation. It demands that we cultivate compassion, kindness, and a deep respect for life in all its forms. God's comeback is a reminder that we are not here to simply take from the world, but to give, to serve, and to love. It is a challenge to live in a way that honors the divine presence in everything around us, from the smallest insect to the vast oceans, from the poorest communities to the richest. Every aspect of creation is interconnected, and to truly embrace the divine comeback, we must first embrace this fundamental truth. A key part of this return is the need for a new vision. The current systems of the world, whether political, economic, or social, are deeply flawed. They are built on structures of power and control that often disregard the value of human dignity and the sanctity of life. God's return is a call to rethink these systems. It urges us to build a world based on justice, peace, and love. These principles are not abstract. They are the very fabric of a divinely ordered universe. If we are to experience a true divine return, It must be accompanied by a radical transformation in how we organize ourselves as societies. At the same time, this comeback requires us to confront the inner world of each individual. What is the state of your heart? What does it mean to have a soul that is ready for the return of the divine? This is not about outward appearances or religious rituals. It is about the deep inner alignment with the truth of who we are and what we are here to do. The divine comeback does not come to those who merely show up in places of worship or claim to follow certain rules. It comes to those whose hearts are open and whose minds are ready to embrace new possibilities. It requires a willingness to change, to let go of old paradigms that no longer serve us, and to embrace a vision of life that is bigger than ourselves. The divine comeback in this sense is not about external power or grand miracles. It is about a shift in consciousness that alters the way we relate to the world, to each other, and to ourselves. It is the return of the awareness that we are more than just material beings. We are spiritual entities connected to a source that transcends time and space. This realization, if fully embraced, has the power to change not only our personal lives, but also the course of history. When we talk about God's return, we also need to acknowledge the importance of the individual journey. Each of us must undertake a personal pilgrimage to understand what the divine presence means in our own lives. It is a deeply personal experience, one that cannot be dictated by others, but must be experienced firsthand. For some, this may involve reconnecting with their religious roots, while for others it may mean embarking on a journey of spiritual exploration and discovery. But at the heart of it all is the recognition that we are spiritual beings on a human journey, and the return of the divine calls us to reconnect with that deeper truth. However, there is also a collective element to this return. We are not simply individual beings, isolated in our journeys. We are part of a larger web of existence. The divine comeback is not just for one person, but for all of humanity. It beckons us to come together, to recognize that our fates are intertwined and that true change cannot happen until we collectively recognize our shared responsibility to one another and to the planet. It is a call to heal the divisions that separate us, whether they are cultural, racial, political, or economic, and to work together to create a world where peace, justice, and love can flourish. In conclusion, the return of the divine is not something to be passively awaited. It is an invitation to actively participate in the transformation of the world and our own lives. God's comeback is not simply about a dramatic event that will happen in the future. It is already happening within us every day, in every choice we make, every act of kindness, every moment of truth. Every effort to heal and restore is part of that divine return. It is a call for us to open our hearts, expand our consciousness, and take responsibility for the world we are creating. This is the essence of the divine comeback, a reminder that the power of transformation lies not only in the heavens, but also within us, waiting to be awakened. So as we await this divine return, we must remember that it is not a singular moment, but an ongoing invitation to live fully, to love deeply, and to heal the world. It is not about waiting for something to happen in the future, but about realizing that the moment of change is always now. God's comeback is not just a promise, it is a call to action, a call to awaken the divine potential within each of us and to create a world that reflects the beauty, justice, and love of and in doing so, we become part of that divine return. The divine comeback is not simply an event in time, something that can be pinpointed on a calendar, but rather a profound catalyst for transformation, one that calls each of us, both individually and collectively, to examine our lives and the state of the world we live in. It is not about waiting for a singular moment of divine intervention, but about recognizing the ongoing opportunity for change that this return represents. When we speak of God returning, it is not merely a return of a figure or a savior. but the return of truth, love, and consciousness that pushes us to face the uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world around us. This transformation, however, is not limited to a personal journey. It is meant to ripple outward, affecting the broader society in profound ways. The idea of transformation is central to this divine comeback because it challenges us to confront the disconnect that exists between our ideal selves and our reality. The world we live in often promotes values that are at odds with the deeper truths of our existence. We are taught to prioritize wealth, power, and personal achievement over compassion, humility, and unity. We live in a culture of distraction, of ego-driven pursuits that obscure our awareness of our deeper purpose. But when God comes back, when this divine presence reawakens within us, it calls for a reorientation, a shift in how we see the world, how we see ourselves, and how we relate to one another. This transformation begins on an individual level, with each person facing their own inner conflict. How have we lived so far? Have we allowed ourselves to be consumed by the superficialities of daily life, chasing after fleeting moments of happiness and success? Or have we sought meaning, depth, and connection? The divine comeback asks us to look within and to recognize where we have fallen out of alignment with our truest self. It invites us to remember that we are more than just physical beings existing in a material world. We are spiritual beings on a profound journey of awakening. The recognition of this truth requires us to confront the brokenness in ourselves and in the world. The world is not as it should be, and this return forces us to acknowledge that. We cannot ignore the suffering, the inequality, the environmental destruction, and the conflicts that plague humanity. These are not just distant issues, they are the wounds of a collective psyche, and the divine return is calling us to heal them. It calls for a recognition that the world's problems cannot be solved through external forces alone, but require an internal shift in how we approach life itself. Healing begins with the individual, and this transformation begins with a change in how we understand our own role in the world. But it is not enough to simply recognize the brokenness of the world. The divine comeback also brings the call to action. It isn't enough to sit idly by, waiting for a divine figure to fix things for us. We must take responsibility for our part in this healing process. This transformation requires us to recognize that we are not separate from the world around us. We are deeply interconnected with the suffering and joy of others. The divine presence that is returning isn't merely a figure waiting to save us from our own mistakes. It is a force that pushes us to participate in the healing of the world. This active engagement and transformation is what makes the divine return so powerful. It doesn't just change the world in a dramatic, once-in-a-lifetime event. It continuously works through each individual, urging them to make the small, everyday choices that lead to greater healing and wholeness. In this light, the divine comeback acts as a mirror. It reflects back to us both our highest potential and our deepest flaws. We are challenged to rise to the occasion, to become the best version of ourselves, to live with purpose, kindness, and compassion. This return is not about the expectation of an outward event, but about an inner awakening, a coming back to a truer sense of self, to a deeper sense of purpose. In recognizing the brokenness within and around us, we are invited to bring about change, to participate in the healing, not through grand gestures, but through the simple yet profound acts of love, understanding, and collective action. The transformative power of this divine return is not limited to a specific religious belief or structure, but is a universal call to all of humanity. It transcends boundaries, calling us to return to the essence of who we are as beings who are meant to love, connect, and heal. It asks us to look beyond division and embrace our shared humanity, whether it is through the recognition of our spiritual essence or the acknowledgement of our common responsibilities toward one another. The divine comeback is a return to the principles that have the power to change the very fabric of society. In embracing this call to transformation, we are not simply waiting for change to occur externally. We are actively creating it through our choices, actions, and mindset. We understand that true change begins within our hearts, within our relationships, and within our communities. The divine comeback is an invitation to live with a deeper sense of purpose, to contribute to a collective healing, and to work toward a more just, compassionate, and loving world. This is not a passive waiting, but an active, intentional process of transformation that begins the moment we recognize the divine within us and the world around us. The divine return, in essence, is not an isolated event in history. It is a continuous unfolding, a constant invitation to awaken, heal, and transform. It calls us to realign with our higher purpose and to take action to heal the world, not in the future, but here and now. This return is both personal and collective, asking each of us to contribute to the larger movement of change, creating a world that reflects the highest truths of existence. The divine return brings with it a profound reminder of the interconnectedness of all life. This understanding that everything is connected is one of the most fundamental truths that the return of God seeks to awaken within us. In a world that often emphasizes division, competition, and separation, the divine comeback calls us to reimagine life as a vast, interconnected web where every being, every organism, and every part of the environment plays a crucial role. Recognizing this interconnectedness is not only a spiritual revelation, but a necessary principle for achieving harmony, healing, and sustainable existence. The notion that we are all connected may seem abstract or idealistic to some, but the reality is that everything in the universe operates within a complex system of interrelationships. From the smallest microbe to the largest animal, from human beings to plants, oceans, and the air we breathe, we are all part of an intricate and delicate network of life. Our actions, thoughts, and choices do not exist in isolation. They send ripples that affect the whole of creation. This is where the return of God brings clarity and a sense of responsibility. We cannot claim to be connected to the divine without recognizing our connection to the world around us. To embrace one is to embrace the other. When we acknowledge the interconnectedness of life, we begin to see the world through a lens of compassion, respect, and love. Compassion becomes a natural response because we understand that when one part of the web suffers, the entire system is affected. The pain of another being, whether human, animal, or plant, is felt in some way by all of us. When one species is endangered, when an ecosystem collapses, or when a person is in distress, the effects reverberate throughout the network of life. This interconnectedness compels us to feel the suffering of others as our own and to act in ways that seek to alleviate that suffering, whether it is through acts of kindness, environmental conservation, or social justice. This is why the divine return invites us to shift our attitudes from one of dominance over nature and other beings to one of stewardship and reverence. In the modern world, we often view nature as something to be exploited, as a resource to be consumed. Yet the divine return calls us to recognize the sanctity of all life, not just human life. It teaches us that we are not above the earth, but part of it. Just one thread in the vast web of existence. Every living being has intrinsic value, and our well-being is directly tied to the well-being of the planet and all its inhabitants. Respect for all forms of life is one of the core principles that emerge when we grasp the interconnectedness of all beings. This respect is not just for other humans, but extends to animals, plants, and the earth itself. Our ancestors understood this concept intuitively as they lived in more direct harmony with nature. They saw the earth as sacred and all creatures, human and non-human, as integral parts of a larger cosmic order. In our modern world, however, this respect has often been forgotten, overshadowed by a focus on material gain and human-centric values. The divine return urges us to rekindle that respect, to return to a deeper understanding of our relationship with the natural world. It challenges us to consider the impact of our actions on future generations and the ecosystems that sustain life. It asks us to reflect on how we treat the animals that share our planet, how we care for the plants that give us oxygen, and how we honor the earth that provides for us. In a time where environmental degradation, species extinction, and climate change threaten the delicate balance of life, the return of the divine offers a reminder that we are all responsible for the preservation of the web of life. Embracing the interconnectedness of all life also invites us to shift from a mindset of scarcity to one of abundance. Often we operate under the belief that there is not enough to go around, that resources are limited, and that we must compete for what little exists. This scarcity mentality creates division, conflict, and exploitation. But the divine return offers a different vision, a vision of abundance that arises from understanding that when we care for one part of the web, we uplift the whole. By nurturing the planet, sharing resources, and living in harmony with each other, we create a world where everyone has enough and where life thrives in its full expression. Living in harmony with the world and each other requires a deep shift in perspective, one that sees beyond our individual desires and looks to the collective good. When we understand the interconnectedness of all life, we recognize that what we do to one part of the world, we do to ourselves. This recognition shapes the way we interact with others, human and non-human alike. It teaches us the importance of empathy and understanding, of seeing others not as separate from us, but as reflections of our own selves. When we hurt another being, we are, in effect, hurting a part of ourselves. Conversely, when we show kindness and compassion, we contribute to the healing of the world. This interconnectedness also calls for a new kind of leadership and action in the world. In the face of global challenges like climate change, poverty, and social injustice, the divine return asks us to move beyond individualistic, self-serving pursuits and to think collectively. It encourages us to adopt policies and practices that prioritize the well-being of the whole, not just a select few. Whether it is advocating for environmental sustainability, fighting for social equity, or ensuring that all beings have access to basic needs, the divine return beckons us to lead with a sense of shared responsibility. Understanding the interconnectedness of all life is also crucial for our spiritual growth. It reminds us that we are not separate from the divine. We are expressions of the divine, intricately woven into the fabric of the universe. Our spiritual journey cannot be disconnected from the well-being of the world we live in. As we deepen our connection with God, we also deepen our connection with the earth and all its inhabitants. To embrace the divine return is to embrace our role in the grand tapestry of existence and to honor the sacredness of every life form. In the end, the interconnectedness of all life is not just a philosophical concept, it is a call to action. It challenges us to live more mindfully, to treat the world and its creatures with respect, and to work toward a future where harmony, compassion, and sustainability prevail. The divine return reminds us that we are all in this together, and it is only through collective care and love for each other and the planet that we can create a world where all beings thrive. To recognize this interconnectedness is to recognize the divine in all things, and in doing so, we become active participants in the healing and transformation of the world. The return of the divine is not just a call for personal transformation, but a profound invitation to reconsider and reimagine the systems that govern our societies. It calls for a reevaluation of the social, political, and economic structures that have shaped our world and often perpetuated inequality, conflict, and environmental degradation. These systems, deeply entrenched in power, control, and competition, have long been at odds with the values of justice, peace, and love that the divine return seeks to restore. The time has come for a radical shift, one that challenges the status quo and calls humanity to rebuild institutions that truly serve the collective good, honor human dignity, and protect the planet At the heart of this reevaluation is the recognition that many of the structures we rely on today were built on principles of domination, exploitation, and division. Capitalism, in its most extreme forms, thrives on the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a few, leaving the vast majority struggling to meet their basic needs. Political systems often cater to the interests of the elite, perpetuating inequality and fostering social unrest. These systems are not neutral. They are designed to maintain the existing power dynamics, often at the expense of marginalized communities and the environment. They encourage short-term gain over long-term sustainability and profit over people. The divine return offers a stark reminder that these structures are not aligned with the higher principles of love, justice, and peace. If we are to embrace the transformative power of this return, we must first recognize the harm caused by the systems we have built and acknowledge their failure to create a fair and just society. This does not mean dismantling all institutions, but rather a reevaluation of their foundations, purposes, and the values they uphold. It challenges us to ask the tough questions. What does a truly just society look like? What systems can be transformed to reflect our shared humanity and the divine principles that unite us all? How can we organize our world in a way that promotes the well-being of every individual and respects the integrity of the earth? The current economic system in particular requires urgent attention. Capitalism, in its most dominant form, has become a force of inequality, exploitation, and environmental destruction. The relentless pursuit of profit has led to a disregard for human rights and the exploitation of natural resources, often causing irreparable harm to the planet. Corporations driven by profit motives exploit cheap labor, fuel environmental degradation, and prioritize growth at the expense of well-being. The growing wealth gap is a direct consequence of this system, where a small elite controls the majority of the world's wealth while millions of people live in poverty without access to basic necessities like health care, education, and clean water. The divine return calls us to question the very foundation of this system. It urges us to shift away from a model that values material wealth above human dignity and instead create an economy that centers on human flourishing, sustainability, and equitable distribution of resources. This vision calls for the creation of alternative economic models, ones that prioritize sustainability, social welfare, and community well-being over corporate greed and unchecked growth. Concepts like a circular economy, which focuses on reducing waste, reusing resources, and promoting environmental sustainability, align more closely with the principles of justice and respect for all life. A more inclusive economic system would address the disparities that exist and ensure that every individual has access to the opportunities they need to live a dignified life. Similarly, the political systems that dominate many societies today often reinforce power imbalances rather than promote true democracy and equality. In many parts of the world, political leaders serve the interests of the wealthy few rather than the needs of the people. Corruption, authoritarianism, and inequality are often the results of political systems that are built on self-interest rather than service to humanity. These systems perpetuate division, create conflict, and fail to address the root causes of societal issues such as poverty, injustice, and war. The divine return calls for a reevaluation of these systems as well, one that emphasizes participatory democracy, accountability, and the common good. It challenges us to think about what it means to govern in a way that serves everyone, especially those who have been historically marginalized or oppressed. True leadership, according to divine principles, is about service, compassion, and the well-being of the collective. It is about ensuring that every voice is heard, that justice is served, and that power is not concentrated in the hands of a few. The return of the divine calls for the dismantling of structures that perpetuate inequality and for the creation of systems that prioritize peace, justice, and human rights. Moreover, the environmental crisis that we face is inextricably linked to the systems we have built. The exploitation of natural resources for short-term profit has led to widespread environmental degradation, climate change, and loss of biodiversity. The divine return reminds us that the earth is not a resource to be exploited, but a sacred trust to be protected and nurtured. The systems that prioritize economic growth over environmental sustainability must be reevaluated. Instead of promoting the relentless exploitation of natural resources, we must shift toward systems that recognize the earth as a living, interconnected entity. This requires a commitment to sustainable practices, renewable energy, and the protection of ecosystems that are vital for the survival of all life on the planet. The transformation of our social, political, and economic systems requires a radical shift in consciousness, a shift from a mindset of scarcity, competition, and individualism to one of abundance, cooperation, and collective responsibility. The return of the divine calls us to embrace a new way of thinking, one that recognizes our interconnectedness with each other and the planet. It asks us to move beyond the narrow self-interest that often drives our decisions and instead work toward the common good, ensuring that every person, every community, and every being is treated with respect and dignity. The process of reevaluating and transforming these systems will not be easy. It requires a willingness to challenge deeply ingrained beliefs, to confront entrenched power structures, and to take action on behalf of those who have been silenced or oppressed. But it is not impossible. The divine return empowers us to reimagine the world in a way that reflects the principles of justice, peace, and love. It reminds us that we are not helpless in the face of these challenges, but that we have the power to create change. This transformation, while daunting, is essential if we are to create a world that reflects the divine vision of unity, compassion, and harmony. It is a world where all people live in peace and dignity, where the environment is cared for, and where justice and love guide every decision we make. At the heart of the divine return lies the profound call for a personal spiritual awakening. This awakening is not merely a passive event that happens to us, but a deeply personal journey, one that requires active participation, introspection, and a willingness to transform. Each individual is called to rediscover their true nature, to reconnect with the divine within, and to understand their purpose in the grander tapestry of existence. The return of the divine invites us to open our hearts and minds to a higher consciousness, a deeper understanding of who we are and why we are here on this earth. In many ways, the divine return is an invitation to break free from the distractions and limitations of the material world. The modern world, with its noise, its endless demands, and its pursuit of external validation, often drowns out the quiet whispers of the soul. It encourages us to chase after things that promise fulfillment but leave us feeling empty and disconnected. Many people caught in this cycle lose sight of their true essence and purpose. The divine return disrupts this cycle, calling us back to the heart of our being, where a deeper sense of meaning and connection resides. This spiritual awakening begins with the recognition that we are not just physical beings limited to the here and now, but spiritual beings with an eternal essence. We are not defined solely by our circumstances, our past mistakes, or the roles we play in society. We are reflections of the divine, and within us exists a wellspring of wisdom, love, and potential waiting to be tapped into. This awakening is a realization that our lives are not random or meaningless, but that we are part of a larger, interconnected universe with a higher purpose. The divine return in this sense calls us to peel away the layers of conditioning, societal expectations, and ego-driven desires that obscure our true nature. It asks us to let go of the illusion of separateness and to recognize the oneness that connects all of creation. This journey inward requires courage and honesty. It asks us to face our fears, our doubts, and our wounds, to heal the parts of ourselves that have been neglected or buried. It also requires us to embrace the unknown as we venture beyond the confines of what we think we know, opening ourselves to new possibilities, new perspectives, and new ways of being. One of the key elements of personal spiritual awakening is the cultivation of a deep inner stillness. In the rush of everyday life, it is easy to overlook the quiet voice within, the voice that speaks to us of love, truth, and purpose. But this voice is always there, waiting to be heard. The divine return urges us to slow down, to create space for reflection, and to listen with an open heart. In moments of stillness, we reconnect with our inner wisdom, gaining clarity about our path and the direction we're meant to take. This awakening is also about opening our hearts to a higher understanding of ourselves and others. It calls us to see beyond the surface, beyond our labels, judgments, and preconceived notions, and to recognize the divine spark in everyone we encounter. It challenges us to move beyond our ego-driven tendencies, our desire for power, control, and validation, and to embrace humility, compassion, and empathy. As we awaken spiritually, we begin to see the world through the eyes of the heart, understanding that every person, every living being is worthy of love and respect. Through this awakening, we also come to recognize that our lives have a purpose that transcends personal gain or success. We are not here merely to accumulate wealth, status, or material possessions. Our true purpose is to grow spiritually, to contribute to the well-being of others, and to align ourselves with the higher principles of love, peace, and justice. This understanding gives our lives deeper meaning as we begin to understand that every action, no matter how small, has a ripple effect in the world. Whether it is through a simple act of kindness, a word of encouragement, or a commitment to living authentically, we realize that our lives matter and that we are part of something far greater than ourselves. This journey of personal spiritual awakening is not always easy. It is a process of continuous growth and evolution, one that requires us to confront our deepest fears, limiting beliefs, and past traumas. But it is also one of the most rewarding and fulfilling experiences we can have. As we awaken to our true nature, we begin to experience a deep sense of peace and contentment. We no longer feel the need to search for fulfillment in external sources because we have discovered an inner reservoir of joy and connection. This peace is not fleeting or dependent on circumstances. It is a deep, abiding state of being that transcends the ups and downs of life. The divine return also teaches us that this awakening is not an isolated experience, but one that is meant to be shared with others. As we reconnect with the divine within ourselves, we are called to help others do the same. We are called to be beacons of light in a world that often feels dark and chaotic. This does not mean that we must all become spiritual teachers or leaders, but rather that we are called to embody the principles of love, compassion, and wisdom in our everyday lives. When we awaken spiritually, we become instruments of healing, guiding others by our example and showing them the way through our actions. Ultimately, personal spiritual awakening is about realizing our divine potential and stepping into the fullness of who we are meant to be. It is about aligning ourselves with the highest truths of existence and living in a way that reflects those truths. The divine return invites us to awaken to our true purpose, to reconnect with the divine source from which we came, and to live our lives in alignment with the principles of love, compassion, and truth. It calls us to open our hearts and minds, to embrace our higher selves, and to embody the light of the divine in all that we do. In this way, personal spiritual awakening is not just an individual experience, but a collective one. As each person awakens to their divine nature, the world itself begins to heal. The divine return, in its most profound sense, is about the awakening of humanity as a whole, a return to our true essence and the rediscovery of our interconnectedness with each other and with the divine. Through this collective awakening, we can create a world that reflects the highest ideals of love, peace, and harmony, where every individual is free to live a life of purpose, meaning, and connection. The return of God is not a passive event that simply happens to us, but an invitation to actively participate in a divine process that unfolds in and through our lives. It is a call to rise beyond a sense of helplessness or waiting for a future event to transform the world, and instead to engage with the present moment with purpose, intention, and authenticity. Every act of kindness, every moment of love, and every effort to heal is part of this divine return. We are not merely recipients of divine grace, we are co-creators of the world that is being reborn. The return of the divine is not only about the world changing, it is about us becoming the change. Too often, we think of divine intervention or transformation as something that will occur at some distant time or as an event that will be outside of our control. We wait for a miraculous moment, believing that the divine will fix everything, perhaps through the actions of others or a future revelation. However, the true essence of divine return is a realization that we too are integral participants in the unfolding of this transformation. It asks us to live with awareness, to understand that our daily actions and decisions have the power to influence the collective good. We are not just observers of a divine drama. We are active participants in it. One of the most powerful ways we can engage in this process is by living authentically. To live authentically is to align our inner truth with our outer actions. It means being true to ourselves, acknowledging our strengths and weaknesses, and acting in ways that reflect our deepest values. When we act from a place of authenticity, we are more in tune with our higher selves, and the divine energy flows more freely through us. This authenticity creates a ripple effect that not only transforms us, but also the world around us. Our actions, rooted in authenticity, inspire others to do the same. It becomes a collective awakening, where each individual living with purpose and truth adds to the greater shift toward love and unity. Living with purpose is another cornerstone of active participation in the divine process. Each person has a unique role to play, a particular path that is meant to be walked. The divine return calls us to discover this path and to embrace it fully. Our purpose might not always be grand or world-changing in the traditional sense, but it is important nonetheless. Whether it is through raising children with love and wisdom, supporting a community, or contributing to a cause that promotes justice, every purpose is valuable in the divine scheme. By living with intention and seeking to make a positive difference, we align ourselves with the greater movement of transformation. Purpose is not always something that comes easily or is immediately clear. It often requires introspection, a deep questioning of who we are and what we are meant to do in the world. It might require stepping out of our comfort zones and taking risks, following our passions and allowing ourselves to be vulnerable in the process. However, this is part of the divine journey, learning to trust the process, to trust ourselves, and to trust that we are being guided toward the right path. When we live with purpose, we become conduits for divine energy, contributing to the healing of ourselves and the world. Kindness and love are central acts of participation in this divine return. The divine is often spoken of as love, and as we seek to embody this love in our daily lives, we actively participate in the return of God. Kindness, whether in small gestures or large acts, is a way of extending divine love into the world. Every time we choose compassion over judgment, forgiveness over resentment, or selflessness over selfishness, we take part in the divine return. These actions are not insignificant. They are the building blocks of a transformed world. In a world that often seems consumed by negativity, fear, and division, every act of kindness becomes a beacon of hope and light. Furthermore, healing, whether it is emotional, physical, or spiritual, is a key part of the active participation in the divine return. Healing requires both an internal and external commitment. We must be willing to heal ourselves first, acknowledging the wounds, the trauma, and the hurts that we carry, and then choosing to release them. Healing is also about recognizing the collective pain of humanity and the earth and working actively to mend those wounds. When we heal ourselves, we heal the world. Our healing contributes to the collective consciousness, sending out ripples of restoration and peace. Each effort to heal, whether through meditation, therapy, prayer, or compassionate action, becomes part of the greater healing process that the divine return is ushering into the world. An essential aspect of this active participation is recognizing that we are not alone in this process. While each of us has a unique journey, we are all part of a larger interconnected web of life. As we engage with others and work together to create positive change, we are not only transforming ourselves, but also contributing to the collective transformation of humanity. No act of kindness, no gesture of love, no attempt to heal is ever truly solid. It reverberates outward, touching lives and inspiring others. When we embody the divine qualities of compassion, peace, and understanding, we invite others to do the same. Living in harmony with the divine return also means recognizing the sacredness of the present moment. The divine is not a distant future promise. It is here, now, in every interaction, in every breath, in every choice we make. By staying present and conscious, we bring the divine into every aspect of our lives, our relationships, our work, our creativity, our service to others. All of it can become an expression of the divine. When we live with awareness and intention, we are co-creating the world we seek, one that reflects the higher truths of love, peace, and unity. To actively participate in the divine return means to trust in the process, even when things seem uncertain or difficult. Transformation is rarely instantaneous. It is gradual, often unfolding in ways we do not immediately understand. However, each choice we make to live authentically, to show love, to heal, and to serve others brings us closer to the divine reality that we seek. As we step into our roles as agents of transformation, we empower not only ourselves, but the world around us. We become the living embodiment of divine love and purpose, co-creating the change we wish to see, one act of kindness, one decision for truth, and one moment of healing at a time. Through this active participation, we not only fulfill our personal potential, but contribute to the collective awakening of humanity. The divine return is not a passive waiting game. It is a dynamic, ongoing process of co-creation. When we embrace our role in this sacred work, we begin to experience the divine presence not as something distant or separate, but as a vibrant, living force flowing through us, guiding us to become the change the world so desperately needs. The divine comeback serves as a profound reminder of our collective responsibility, urging humanity to recognize the interconnectedness of all people and the importance of working together toward a common goal. It calls us to transcend the boundaries that divide us, whether they are cultural, racial, political, or economic, and to embrace the shared mission of creating a more just, peaceful, and harmonious world. The return of the divine is not just a call for individual transformation, but a collective awakening, one that challenges us to step beyond our differences and actively engage in healing the fractures in our societies. This divine call compels us to act as stewards of not just our own lives, but of the collective human experience. One of the most striking aspects of the divine return is its emphasis on unity. Unity does not mean uniformity. It does not demand that we erase our differences, but it calls for us to honor those differences in a way that fosters cooperation rather than conflict. The divine comeback asks us to recognize that we are all part of a greater whole, woven together by the same universal threads of love, compassion, and shared humanity. Our distinctions, while important in shaping our identities and cultures, should never become a source of division. Rather, they are invitations for us to learn from each other, celebrate our diversity, and build bridges where there have long been walls. The concept of collective responsibility is at the heart of this divine return. It challenges us to look beyond individual concerns and embrace a broader vision of collective well-being. In the modern world, there is often an emphasis on personal achievement, self-reliance, and individual success. But the return of the divine calls for a shift in focus, urges us to take responsibility not only for ourselves, but also for the world around us, the planet, the communities we live in, and the generations to come. This responsibility is not just about addressing immediate needs, but also about thinking long term, ensuring that the choices we make today contribute to a sustainable, just, and peaceful future. To fully grasp the importance of collective responsibility, we must first acknowledge the ways in which humanity has fractured itself. These fractures have manifested in numerous ways, socially, politically, and economically. Cultural and racial divisions have led to injustice, oppression, and marginalization. Political divisions, fueled by partisanship and tribalism, have created an environment where dialogue and cooperation are increasingly rare. Economic inequalities have resulted in the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a few, leaving millions in poverty and despair. These divides have created an us versus them mentality, where people view each other as enemies rather than allies, hindering progress and collective growth. The divine return is a clarion call to heal these divides. It challenges us to transcend these artificial barriers and recognize the inherent dignity and worth of every human being. The return of the divine is not just about personal salvation, but about the salvation of the collective. We cannot separate ourselves from the suffering of others, as their pain is our pain, and their joy is our joy. The divine call invites us to look beyond our own interests and to see the world through the eyes of empathy and compassion. It reminds us that no one is free until everyone is free, and no one is truly thriving while others are suffering. Healing these divisions requires more than just superficial efforts or temporary fixes. It demands deep, systemic change. Changes in the way we view ourselves and each other, the way we organize our societies, and the way we engage with the world. It calls for the dismantling of systems that perpetuate inequality, exploitation, and division. Whether it is the structures that sustain racial injustice, political polarization, or economic disparity, the divine return urges us to take collective action to create a world where justice and peace are not just ideals, but lived realities for all. However, this collective responsibility is not just about addressing societal problems. It is also about healing the inner divides within ourselves. Each of us carries biases, judgments, and fears that contribute to the larger societal divisions. The divine return calls us to face our own prejudices and insecurities, to recognize the ways in which we have contributed to the divisions we see in the world, and to take responsibility for our part in the healing process. As we work to transform ourselves, we become better equipped to contribute to the collective transformation. Inner peace and personal healing are not isolated from collective peace, they are interconnected. When we heal ourselves, we help heal the world. The path to collective unity requires a shift in perspective, from one of separation and competition to one of cooperation and collaboration. The divine return calls us to adopt a worldview where we recognize that the success and well-being of one individual or group are not achieved at the expense of others. True progress is achieved when we lift each other up, when we work together to create solutions that benefit the whole, whether it is in the context of politics, business, or community building. Collaboration rooted in the principles of justice, compassion, and respect is the foundation for true unity. At a practical level, this means fostering open, honest dialogue between groups who have been historically divided. It means creating spaces where people can share their experiences, listen to one another, and work together to find common ground. It means moving beyond ideological divides and focusing on the shared values that unite us all. Values like justice, peace, love, and human dignity. The divine return is a call for us to engage in this dialogue, to build relationships based on mutual respect and to work together to create a world where everyone's voice is heard and valued. It also means recognizing that unity is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process. Healing divisions takes time, effort, and commitment. The divine return calls us to be persistent in our pursuit of unity, even when the road is difficult or progress seems slow. It urges us to hold a vision of a world united by love and compassion, even in the face of challenges. Through small, consistent actions, we contribute to the larger transformation that is unfolding. Ultimately, the divine comeback reminds us that we are all interconnected, that our fates are intertwined. When we work together in unity, we can overcome even the most entrenched divisions and create a world that reflects the divine qualities of love, justice, and peace. The divine return is not just about individual salvation, but about the healing and redemption of all humanity. It calls us to embrace our collective responsibility, to heal the divides that separate us, and to work together to create a world where justice, peace, and unity prevail. In this way, the divine return becomes a shared journey, a